So one of the things I'm interested to get your perspective on, and it's something that really it's kind of a cornerstone of this podcast, and something that I'm really kind of always thinking about is the intersection of the skills that we learn and that we develop in sport and how those are applied to other areas of our lives. Because I've long been an advocate that sport is valuable over and above purely the fitness component, right? That's certainly from a recreational athlete perspective. That's often where we just kind of we think that's the only value that it provides is a healthy body. But I know based on your experience and your background that you see connections over and above that, and you've been able to apply in your own life as well as the work that you do with your clients in what you learned as in your life as a professional tennis player to high achieving, high performing individuals. So I'd love to just kick things off with your perspective and kind of general take on what are those takeaways? What is the value of applying those things that we learn in sport to other areas of our lives, be it business or any other areas that you see crossover there? What's that look and sound like for you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think, as you mentioned, like sports is not just, the physical sort of effort and, looking nice, looking sharp and all that stuff. I think, and I think at any age, you can decide to use sport more as a way to shift your mindset to another level, to actually challenge yourself to the point where you can overcome your physical abilities and get to the next level and see how your mindset stretches along the way. And what I mean by that, I guess, when I look at my professional career in tennis, and it was not just the performance itself or winning or losing, it's everything that comes as a sort of byproduct of it. And a lot of it's sort of things that we try to avoid, like losing, playing under pressure, playing when you're injured, playing when, there's too much wind or there's too many opponent, maybe like fans from the opponent side. And all those things that, we try to avoid and view it as a challenge, in my opinion, are so, like, all those small building blocks that really make it or break it for you later on in life. Or, if you even practice like some sort of sport on the side, kind of as a hobby. But I think it is kind of a mirror or reflection how you show up as an athlete. And then when you look at your professional endeavors, whether they are on a corporate level or with a startup, I see it with myself. A lot of clients that come to me, they see that sort of competitive side in themselves as athletes, and they're like, what, I've never performed as an athlete, but I feel like I have all these sort of aspirations that are just more on the business side, not necessarily in running or kicking the ball. And when I left professional sports and got into corporate, I never wanted to lose that sense of being around high achievers. And now in my coaching business, I just wanted to work with people who I believe were like me or similar to me, that they always looked for something more. And it's not just the money. I think the money is one of the byproducts of hard work or having successful business. It's all those things beyond that drives us to be better. And even top athletes get to the point where they're very good. And then it's about maintaining that level and then even challenging yourself further to develop a mindset that actually starts serving only you, not anybody else. You're not pleasing anybody else, but you want to just get better every single day. And I see a lot of business owners or high up, corporate individuals where they get to the point where perhaps they're financially stable, perhaps there's very few people to report to, and it's a very lonely place just to be with all the sort of struggles, problems, but more importantly, at times they might just lose a sense of what is the challenge, how to motivate yourself, And often they use sport to kind of get that high, get that adrenaline rush, that endorphin. And it's difficult sometimes to, uh, challenge yourself when you're very comfortable, if it makes sense. Um, a lot of high performance, whether in, like on a tennis court or a football field or in boardrooms, they just really want and need someone to squeeze the last bits out of themselves. So that's my take on sports. That whether you start as a young person or continue in your adulthood or later in life, um, there's no there's just no downside to performing in sports at any level. I think if besides just obviously being super healthy, and I think that the health aspect becomes more important also to people when they reach a certain level of seniority, stress, responsibility, and being able to support that growth in your professional career with the health. Because if you have no health, you just cannot you cannot compete at that level. um so yeah, that's sort of my take on. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I like you touched on, I think, the idea that, like, discomfort, or resistance leads to growth, right? And you were saying, like, the people, if you're in a business setting, you need that, you need that to kind of get the last 1% out of you, or what does it look like to think differently, or to be pushed to evolve, or to respond in different ways. And I've often thought that that is probably one of the most um, important aspects, or kind of, or parallels that we apply from sport to business, is just that consistent interaction with discomfort, right? The goal of training, if we just zoom out and we're saying, okay, I'm here to just build fitness in whatever discipline I'm focused on, well, then it's always going to get harder, right? The goal is never to be comfortable. The goal is to continue to push yourself to be better. So as soon as you adapt and you get a little bit more fit, you make it harder, right? You train more, you do more, you up the intensity, you change your opponents that you're up against. And it's the same thing in the business world, where, pick an example, right? But the goal would be, typically for those that are high achieving, to always look for more opportunities, right? To not stay at a plateau. And I just think that that's a mindset that is, it's hard to get yourself there, right? I think sport provides this kind of natural, kind of inherent, like, repetitive aspect of that just seeps into kind of your subconscious, right? Where you don't maybe even recognize that that's one of the takeaways, but you just so expect that discomfort is part of the process, that when you apply that, when you show up in other areas of your life, you're naturally not interested in comfort. You know that on the other side of discomfort lies growth. And so you're always looking to find that. So what's been specific to kind of the, friction or resistance creates growth. What's been your experience with that? Or I don't know, what are your thoughts on just that general sentiment of that direct kind of corollary between sport and life?
Yeah, I think my own sort of journey, as well as the journey I'm putting my clients through, is just to shift the perspective from, we just naturally want to be comfortable, want things to be easier, or everything go as planned. And when that doesn't happen, we get frustrated. But if you actually shift your mindset or perspective and you say, well, if everything was easy, if there were no failures, then, there wouldn't be that satisfaction. So there is a trade-off. But so so I think for individuals that want to achieve success on the continuous basis, even in the smallest way, but continue striving in a sort of upward trend, is to start thinking, well, if anything gets easier, then I'm not doing something right. And it's not just to always go downward, but it should be hard, because you get paid for solving problems. You don't get paid by having a nice lifestyle. And if you can actually embrace it, like, look, I am just good at solving problems, and 9 out of 10 things in your day-to-day thing should be working on hard things that no one else can do. And if you can have that mindset, okay, what portion of crap I'm going to have today that I have to solve for myself or for my client, and if you can deliver on that, there is a sense of satisfaction. Because equally, for me, I don't want to have only clients that come to me, it's like, yeah, I've achieved everything is great. Sure, this is a byproduct of my work, but clients come to me with problems, and every single day I get problems. But my goal is to make sure that we can turn those problems into solutions, and then in the process learn that actually problems are great. When we have problems, we have value, and we just need to find comfort in this discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And I think similarly in sports, don't take me wrong, I don't remember one single day where I felt like, you know what, running this 30 suicides where I'm about to lose my breath and pass out is amazing and I feel great. When you are performing in any sports, you always in pain, you always struggling, and the day when the practice is easy, in my opinion, is the day that it's just a lost day in practice. So it is very harsh reality, I think, but I think it's by far the most important mind shift that I wish I had even earlier when I was younger. I think I was looking too much for immediate gratification or to feel fine or feel okay. And I think in sports, I kind of grasped on it much earlier. I knew just constant pain, victory, pain. But in business, I thought things would come quicker, sooner. And I think being able to delay your gratification and learn to keep your head down and just put one foot in front of the other. Don't look up too high up, because you might see that the mountain is very high and you're just going to get discouraged. That what served me and a lot of my clients to just stay in a moment and have obviously an outlook on the sort of more distant future. But first you need to make sure that what is between now and tomorrow and a week and a month is being accomplished. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what your goal is. You're never going to get there if you cannot do what's required today.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more, and I think one of the things that I've learned over the years, and probably the skill that I find most value to continue to hone, is the kind of to set my expectations in alignment with the fact that discomfort is actually the goal, right? Is that there's actually not, and you said it, but the goal is that it's not easy, right? If it's on the, if it's on the fitness side, if it's easy, I'm under training, right? I'm not reaching my full potential. And if it's on the business side, like you said, then the goal is actually to solve problems. It's to think about things in a different way. It's to create something that hasn't been created before, whatever your industry and niche and the job is that you're doing. But the fact of the matter is if there's no friction, if there's no discomfort, you're probably not focused on the right thing, right? You're probably, and that's often where too, we do that. We'll take that route because it's an easy win, right? When we're feeling, if we're unclear on what we should focus on, or we're feeling a lack of confidence, we'll kind of go into that lane, because you're like, well, okay, I know I can get a win here, right? When it's really not the highest and best use of your time. Like you said, it's 9 out of 10 things that you do today should be really challenging, right? It should be, and if that's not the case, you're probably focused on the wrong things. But I think yeah.
And I think there are two things, right? I mean, friction is great, but obviously you can be doing things in the wrong way that are causing friction, right? So I think also being mindful of not whether you do exercise, and maybe it's very hard just because you're not doing it right. Right. So it's maybe trying different things from different perspective approaches, testing market, like spending more time on research, but at some point also drawing the lines like, okay, I made my decision. Whether you want business, okay, like I've tried maybe this marketing strategy, this one, and then, choosing something that works, because, friction is great, but it could also be a signal that this is just not the right way, or this is just not the right way to exercise. So I think, this is where I think, just banging your head against the wall is not going to break it. So there obviously has to be, I think, strategy and having that mindset of trying things, but knowing when to stop or when to try something else and pivot. Because otherwise, I think there are certain doors will never open. There are certain marketing, strategies that will never work for your business, and there are never some exercises that will never give you six pack, right? So I think being quite conscious about that, or at least maybe not conscious, because anywhere you go to you start a business and you just don't know what marketing is going to work for you. If you start exercising, you don't know what's going to give you the best results, but you have to start somewhere. But being curious and being open and receptive, and constantly trying to learn and expose yourself to other people who've done that before, I think is, a tremendous value to you that saves you just time. That this is the only thing we don't have, and it doesn't matter whether we are, low income or billionaires. It is irrespective of how much we make. We just have a limited amount of time. So I think utilizing our time to our advantage, to find the best outcome, is something that not everyone gets right.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought that up, and I couldn't agree more. I think, I've long said, specifically now that, kind of hustle culture is alive and well, and everybody gets romanticized, the grind and the this. I'm like, well, you have to hustle in the right direction, right? Like just doing it and not paying attention doesn't. You still have to be tactical. You still have to be critical. You have to understand, what are you moving toward. So I'd like to dive into that more deeply, because I think it's hard to. That's a very forest for the trees situation, right? It can be hard to see that when you're in it. You can think that you're doing the right thing, and you could be willing to do the work, and you could be willing to be uncomfortable, but to be uncomfortable in the wrong direction still doesn't yield the results that you want. And so there is this very real need to also be able to lift your head up and to make hard decisions, to pivot. And so what are some of how do we know what that looks like in your experience? When do we pivot, or what are the signs that we, how do we recognize that it's not the right thing, that we're not working in the right direction? And or how do we recognize that it is something to continue to put effort into, and it just might take more time than we thought, or more effort than we considered it might?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, but from my experience is, I think first of all, looking at your competition, and when you look at your competition, especially the one is doing successful, I would say if they're successful, they've done something right. And if you can save yourself time to actually not repeat the mistakes that they've done, I think that's a key component. Of course, perhaps your competition is 2, 3, 5 years ahead, but if you can track down somehow, or even connect with those people and just say, hey, what have you done? What worked? What haven't worked for you? And what might be working for them now is not what's going to work for you, because they're in a different stage. But perhaps I think having people around you, and I know it's easier said than done, but I think a lot of people underestimate or do not take a full advantage, or do not spend enough time reaching out to people who are in their niche to learn from them, from their mistakes, whether you can do it, for free, because you message them, they give you 50 minutes of a time. But I've paid a lot of money to acquire knowledge of people that been there, have done that. And yes, that was expensive. Many, many times I've made the wrong investment. But through that sort of missteps, I've learned so much more than what I've spent, I believe. And this is kind of, the value is difficult to put sort of in perspective, because kind of intangible. But I think there's no better way of learning and figure out what works, what doesn't work for you than looking at your competition and reaching out to them directly, or acquiring that knowledge from someone who is willing to sell it or give you some time for free, or you pay for it. Because let's be honest, like I remember like starting different businesses and I started from zero, and it's great, but I think I've lost so much time making mistakes that I didn't have to make. And also, I think working on a business that should never exist. That's another one that I see a lot of people develop a product or service that no one wants. And I'm guilty of charge, but it's very tempting because you think like, oh my God, like this makes sense. This is what I would buy, yada, yada, yada. But this is maybe not what market wants. Or maybe market is not ready for it. But we, like you said, we get very romantic about our ideas and we get very attached. So I think having that outside view to kind of almost slap us in the face is like, you know what, like this is great, but let's come down to earth. And that idea is very hard to execute on. And I've slapped many of my clients with that sort of approach where I was like, well, I would like to start that type of a business. It's kind of this and that. And they only think about the upsides. I'm like, let's talk about the downsides. What if it doesn't go well? So I grill them really, really hard, as I've grilled people when I was in VC, just to understand like how much research they've done, how much commitment they think that business will require. And in 90% of my time with my clients, like I kill those ideas. Not for them. They kind of come to conclusion that this idea was just very romantic. And that's why 9 out of 10 businesses or more just go, they don't really survive because the ideas are just, poorly executed. And I think there was Elon Musk said something that, there was something about, people develop a product, but that no one really wanted to buy, or service that there's just no need for it in the market. So I think, long story short is, in my opinion, like you just have to tap into knowledge that already exists, the mistakes that have been done, and how can you learn from it? What's your take on it?
I certainly think the biggest opportunity in any area of our life is if we can scale. We can scale or we can flatten the learning curve by leveraging someone else's access to knowledge, right? So that could be a coach. Like you said, it could be someone who's done the thing before, who's done it slightly different, someone who has access to someone. Like, I think one of the most fruitful investments we can make, whether it's an outlay of our time, whether it's an outlay of our resources financially, or any other way, is to try to put ourselves in positions to be around people to help us flatten that learning curve. It is always going to take longer and cost more than we think. And so if you can flatten that and shorten it, it is going to be the highest and best use of your time. And, I've worked with people in the in sport on the coaching side as well as on the business side. I'm a mentor for startups and different companies and work in lots of different areas. And, that for me is the thing that I feel like where I can provide the most value is if I can just help, because I've done it so poorly myself in the past. Like, I've not done that. I've waited too long. I've pursued the bad idea. I've thought that I could just figure it out on my own. And I would give anything to have that time back, and to have those resources back that I extended to try to figure it out on my own or whatever. And so, yeah, if you can flatten that. And I think, again, I think there is a romantic component, there's a bit of like, I don't know if, it's almost like heroic, right, to do it on your own or to figure it out. And then, and if it's a business idea, we hold that idea very closely and we're very emotionally attached to it. And so that heightens that entire experience. And we think that it's, if we just work hard enough, if we just have X, Y, and Z. And most times it's just not the right idea, right? It's never going to work out. And I think that I think that is a really major part of growth in lots of areas of our lives, is to kind of commit very, very deeply, but also hold the thing itself very loosely, and be able to know, like, I'll do whatever it takes, but also this might not be the thing that I need to do whatever it takes for, right? I might need to redirect that energy to something else. And I think that can go in lots of different directions. But
yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, like most of the people, regardless, when you look back at your life, you probably stayed in businesses for longer than you should, stayed in certain companies longer than you should, in relationships, longer than you should, some toxic ones. It's very early. I mean, very rarely you hear people, I've exited earlier than I should, right? I mean, maybe some, startups that, maybe Amazon that was, very small and then, went sort of big. But I think being able to spot trends in your own behavior and the behavior of the company or your own business. I mean, maybe not behavior, but, trends is like, okay, we have not had, or we've been losing money for the last 6 months, and like, oh, maybe, and like hoping that the next month is going to be better without actually making any tangible changes is just plain stupid, in my opinion, right? Mm-hmm. If you have something big that you're working on, it's like, we just need to finish that sort of, I don't know, implementation of different marketing strategy, or bringing some partners on, or developing new product or service, and that, there will be some sort of tangible outcome behind that. But if you're just hoping that, next month is going to be good, it's like kind of not practicing, not training as hard as you should. And then hoping that maybe when the day of running marathon is going to, come around, you're going to be ready somehow for it. Because I don't know, maybe you are not drinking as much, or maybe you're not having as many sort of sodas or chips. Like I think the success is not a coincidence. It is a byproduct of a lot of sort of small steps, a lot of failures. But to me, failures are not like misstep. It's still a step. And sometimes we learn so much more. I mean, I think we learn much more from failures, from trying what didn't work. So next time you can actually make something work. But being able to pivot, like you said, it's the same in sports. Like, okay, maybe tennis is just, I know tennis, but maybe you play, I don't know, first set, and you keep hitting a ball to someone's forehand, and they keep like winning everything. It's like, well, it's just a signal, right? That, okay, for last 4 times when I hit the ball there, you just finish it. So I just have to be able to analyze, okay, this guy's forehand is pretty good. I better be hitting to the backhand. So you can turn around things very quickly by just analyzing the data. But like you say, when we start businesses, we get so romantic about it, and so attached emotionally, that we need someone to actually make it very raw and very like, this is like more like an object. Like, let's talk about your business from outside, right? And even then, I think it's still difficult, because it's almost like your baby. If someone comes, when your teacher says, oh, your kid at school is like this and that and that, and it's just hard for you to believe, because this is your baby, you love them, and how they can misbehave. So although you're taking all this information from the teacher, you're also thinking like, how dare you say anything like this about my baby, and she's perfect. But I think same if you take just this, feedback with an open mind. It doesn't mean that you have to like it, right? What they say about your son or your daughter, but it's a feedback, and you just take it, and you just have to analyze it with like clear mind. And to me, this is the hardest part, to separate yourself from your emotions to make the best and the most sound decisions.
Yeah, I think just to go back a little bit, there is this need. We oftentimes, I think, kind of tied into that emotion and like the romanticism of it. We get so attached to the idea that we forget that we have to take action in a very specific direction, right? And you said that earlier, it's like, you can't just believe in the thing and then not make changes this month, right? And hope and expect some different outcome. And, and this applies to lots of areas of our lives, right? Like you can't be dissatisfied in a relationship or dissatisfied with your health and then not change something and take some sort of actionable step just because you believe in the thing, right? Or you think that eventually it'll work itself out. And I think, I mean, there's so much opportunity, and I mean, it really ties back to what we kicked things off with, was just the link between kind of what we learn in sport and how that applies to the rest of our lives. Is like, you can't expect to be better in sport. You can't expect to build more fitness and not to train harder, right? Not to practice more, not to show up more. And it's the same thing. And I think we do, we fall victim to that in lots of areas of our lives, certainly in business, is that we forget that, that outcome follows action, and that you have to make some sort of very precise and tactical movements to change things, or admit that it's not working, right? And it's back to the sport side of things. If you've made those changes and it's not working, then, then maybe there's that's not something you should pursue, right? There's a natural ability, or there's a skill that's lacking. We might need to pivot, right? Maybe this particular thing is not where you're going to shine, and that's okay, right? That doesn't mean that effort wasn't valuable. It's like you said, that's the failure is the biggest opportunity, right? I don't really think that I've learned much from success, but I've certainly learned everything that I've learned on the other side of failure. And I love, you said, like, it's not a failure. It's just like, it's a necessary step in the right direction. Like, it's still progress, right? Because you're able to see what didn't work, and you can move on. And I think that that's a really important, and I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. It's just that reframe of failure. I think we have a tendency to kind of dance around that. And I am an advocate that we should name it. Like, nope, that was a failure. It's not we don't even like to use the word a lot of times, right? We say, oh, that was, we didn't, we'll see. We need to pivot. We need to, like, no, it was a failure. Like, that didn't work. That's okay. Let's call it what it is, and then recognize the opportunity on their side of that. And as long as our expectations are aligned around what failure actually means for us and our organizations and our businesses and so on, like, it's the most productive thing that can happen. We just have to be okay with it and know that that's part of it. So,
yeah, for sure. And I have, especially for those clients that come in, they have like big ideas, but they just keep like staying in the same type of like emotion of like thinking, overthinking, having ideas, opportunities, but not acting on it, just being scared of like failure, of, rejection and stuff like that. So then I'm like, okay, like the goal for this week or for this month is like, you have to fail 4 times at something that we agree on. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh my God, like, what do you mean? Like, no, your goal is to go and fail, right? Like, prove me that you're going to fail. And because the idea is like, if I just apply for this job, if I just speak to this guy, if I just reach out to them, if I just change my website, if I change my strategy, if I change my marketing, like, it's just going to go wrong. And I'm like, okay, prove me that's going to go wrong, right? And it's like, those ideas is like kind of like just like mind blocks. But a lot of times when I do this exercise with my clients, it's like, first they're like, well, what do you mean, do you want me to fail? I'm like, yeah, I want you to go and fail. Like, let's just learn a bit of failure. Let's just get that feeling under our skin, as see how comfortable or uncomfortable you are. It's just a lot of times people are more scared of the feeling that they will experience if they fail. But once they experience, it's not as bad as they thought. And look, sometimes they fail, and a lot of times they don't fail, but when they fail, it's like, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought. I'm like, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What you mentioned it, you touched on it earlier, but I know one of the things that you've talked a lot about are like the hidden blocks that we have. And that's one of the things that you work with people on, are these things that stand in our way, right? And they are things that we don't recognize. They're barriers that are mental or self-imposed or sitting below the surface. What are those? Walk me through what those hidden blocks are. I know that I'm sure they're wildly different for different people in different industries, but what are they, and how do they show up and kind of manifest and as we move towards success?
I think a lot of them are first about decision making. And It's basically deciding between this and that, and this takes so much time and energy from a lot of people that it doesn't allow them to move forward. And usually it's like a lot of times the options, like whether you're choosing like the type of the business that you want to start, or the career that you want to pursue, or whatever you choose, is like, let's just choose, let's just sure go through this very, like, elaborate process of making the best decision possible. But to me, this is, we need to make a decision. What's more important is like, irrespective of decision, we're going to make it work. And if you get that mindset, as like, I think this is like gives people a lot of like relief. It's like, okay, because they think the decision, like, of choosing a business, of choosing a job, this is it. But I'm like, no, the real work is going to start after we make a decision. And the most important part, even if you choose wrong, which you're not going to know, like, we just going to make it work regardless, and work until the point where, like, we see, like, hopefully see progress along the way. But equally, when that was the wrong way, we can pivot really quickly. But to me, a lot of people come to me with decision that they need to make, and I'm fine. Decision, we're going to make the decision. But I'm already looking forward, like, regardless of decision, how I see this vision, this goal in 6-12 months, and how we're going to get there. And we're going to make so many decisions along the way. But there are those like small hurdles. Like, they're not small. It's just like, if do I stay in my company and go somewhere else? I'm not saying it's an easy decision, but decision need to be made, because otherwise we live in this very toxic, like, we kind of even like make ourselves all toxic. Like, we don't feel well, about it. We just cannot do anything, and we like make ourselves feel shitty. And a lot of this people come to me, and it's easy solution initially, making decision, and then it's like, I don't feel well, I need to go to the gym. It's like, okay, let's go to this gym, let's sign up for a club, right? Let's sign up for a gym, let's sign up for a tennis lesson, let's sign up for a swim lesson. It's just first step is extremely important, just to make a decision. Some people, I want to get in shape, but I don't know if I should do running or swimming. I'm like, does it even matter? Like, this is actually like easy decision, but they're still thinking that. I think this is like a self-sabotaging thoughts and stories that you tell yourself, that there is a right outcome. I mean, there is a right path in your life. But when I look at my path, like, I've played tennis, I failed, I never was number one. I was investment banker, I never became managing director. So I could say, okay, I failed. And I had my restaurant business, it never scaled to be like, I don't know, multinational chain. I failed. I was venture capitalist, I never invested in a unicorn. And like, if I think of it, it's like, I only failed. But, if we not now, but I've always thought about my life and all the sort of missteps. It's just, it's a way of going somewhere that is going to serve me in the future. And in the moment, it's so difficult to accept it, that the failure is actually a learning lesson, right? And you are heartbroken, and it's okay. Like, I was not laughing when I had to, stop playing professional tennis. I was doing it from an age of 6, and I didn't know anything better. It was extremely difficult. And just to pivot to like normal world, like, I'm sure it was very difficult for you as well, right? The whole transition is like, is unbearable, but it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, I think I love the. I heard a quote, and I don't remember exactly who to give credit to, because I've just kind of become a bit of a mantra. But it's often we think that you have to get motivated to get moving, and the fact of the matter is you have to get moving to get motivated. Meaning that, like, and we talked about this just a minute ago. It's like action leads to action, right? So the most important thing you can do is take action, right? And so waiting for some magical assumed scenario where you're going to have all of the right information and all the right pieces, and it's never going to exist, right? You have to take action. You have to make a decision, and then that action will lead to the appropriate access to more knowledge, and you'll have to make more decisions, and you won't have the information you need for those, but you have to keep moving, right? And you have to, and I think that is, it's certainly one of the things that I try to hold myself very accountable to, is to not to make decisions. I don't want to make them quickly for the sake of making them quickly, but I'm very cognizant of how quickly I move through that process, right? So I don't want to make uninformed decisions or unintelligent decisions, or, make a call on something today just because I want to move through it. But I think that's one of the, and I think about this a lot in lots of areas of my life, is like, just do it, right? Like, consistency is compounding. So if I just, it's fine, right? Like, even if it's the wrong decision, I can just make another decision tomorrow, right? Like, I can pivot from there. I can make decisions based on the fact that I realized that wasn't the right decision. Because that's the only thing that creates progress, right? There is no other route to success than to just continue to make decisions based on the information in front of us. And there is a timely component, right? If we wait too long, the moment passes, right? We will lose our window, whether it's from a health perspective, whether it's, right, like for you, like you had a finite window to play professional tennis. That wasn't going to be open forever. If you would have waited and not taken advantage of the opportunities at some point, probably in relatively short order, that window would have closed and you would have, right, your life would have taken a different path. And I think I'd love, you talked about like your different kind of things you've done in life. And I think about this a lot because people put an incredible amount of pressure on themselves around like what things are supposed to be, right? And it's like, this is how it's supposed to go, and I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be this. And it sounds like, I think that based on how you described kind of your trajectory, you and I are aligned. Where like if I look back, I mean, there's like a million different routes that my life has gone, in different businesses and different things. And yeah, a lot of them, like most of them didn't play out the way that they were like quote unquote supposed to, but they all were a stepping stone in some direction. So in that regard, they were a success. And whether or not they were a failure because they were supposed to be something else, or I thought they would be. So I don't know, just from like a mindset perspective, because that strikes me as a potential, one of the kind of potential like hidden blocks that we were just talking about, right? Is if you harbor these thoughts and feelings about the way something is supposed to be versus taking action in any direction, you're going to continue to kind of squander opportunities, or you're not going to be able to act fast enough. It just feels like that could really be like a self-fulfilling prophecy that just keeps you stuck and keeps you. So I don't know, is that what is that correct from your perspective, or what specifically to kind of that expectation alignment, I guess, around like how things are supposed to be versus how things actually play out? What's been, your experience or take on that?
Yeah, I think there is this a concept for everyone. And if you just zoom out, even, you're supposed to go to this school and then, graduate with this degree and then get this job and then married by this age and have that many. So traditionally, we are conditioned to do things right in the right order for the right companies, and there is some sort of a prestige associated with it. And more than that, there is just external validation that we seek, right? But I think when I look at my life as, I played tennis for a very, very long time, like you said, and I've reached a point where I could continue doing it. But I don't think I would miss out on a lot of other opportunities, like, getting to college, getting scholarship. So there was a major, I had to leave my family. I had to move to the States, across the world. So a lot of trade-offs that I had to do at that stage. But, I think it is really necessary to know or be very mindful of what's enough is enough, or have I pushed enough? And this is also very delicate work that I do with my clients, who often they would come and maybe I would look at their CV and they have like 1 year here, 1 year here, 2 years here, 4 years here. And that's fine. If all of them are just building blocks of something greater, that's not a problem. But what I'm looking for in that sort of trends and behaviors is there a point in any of these companies that you worked at that you were triggered to move somewhere else? Or, maybe people start businesses like here, here, and here. Sometimes you just need to stay in one place for longer to see the tangible results. And for example, what I see, some people who just get to the stage where it just gets a little bit boring, a little bit flat, and maybe not that's challenged. But then the question is, have you been waiting for someone to come and like challenge you, entertain you? It's like, have you done anything to be a self-starter, right? For example, if they work for a company, and that is any level, they will say, oh, it was just not very, I didn't think like the environment was that supportive. Like big thing, like, can you make the environment work for you? If the answer is no, sure, because you cannot grow a flower in the crappy soil. Don't take me wrong, but I think before you move, it's important that have you done everything you could to make the situation better. Otherwise, it looks like it's almost moving from one bad relationship to the other, and it seems like the bad luck is kind of with you, if you know what I mean. But it's not really a bad luck. You can break that karma. It's just, I think, a habit and behavior we develop as we're trying to run away from something. And usually it's the responsibility, it's the harder work. We want someone to motivate us. But the reality is, the higher up you go, the older you get, there'll be less and less people like cheering for you, motivating you. So I think being your own cheerleader and coach is difficult, but I think it's a skill that will take you to places that you have never thought you could go. Because if you can be enough for yourself and motivate yourself, find ways to motivate yourself versus relying on a boss, relying on a client, relying on this or that just to give you this external validation. I think to me, this is like really, really important as well. What do you think?
Certainly intrinsic motivation, I think, is probably a superpower. If I had to put a fine point on it, I agree. I think certainly now more than ever, it is so easy to find extrinsic motivators, right? You could go and you could get on Instagram and you could find that instantly, right? There's all these outlets that we can go for external validation or to see something that gets us fired up. It creates that little spark. And ultimately, those things are very fleeting, and they're not there. In my experience, in kind of the very key and pivotal times, meaning like when it really counts, when the work has to be done, it's typically done outside of the access to that external, validation. It has to come from inside. It's what gets you up in the morning, right? It's why do I get up early versus get up late, right? Like, could I get up whenever I want? Sure. But I don't, because I know, right? There's just this, and I think we being able to create that fire and that internal drive, like I said, I think those that can do that and recognize the importance of continuing to hone that skill. And I think it is something that it's a muscle that has to be worked, right? You have to continue to understand what that looks and feels like for you, because it also changes, in my experience, it changes at different stages of our lives, right? Like what got me out of bed when I was a young entrepreneur in my early 20s to now is very different, right? And so again, I think it's a superpower. I think for those of us that are that really want to make sure that we are consistently working towards our full potential, I think it's the thing that we should work on the most, right? I don't think that it's not going to be there from the outside, right? It's not, like you said, it's also not anyone else's responsibility. It's not your boss's responsibility. It's not your co-founder, your business partner. It's not your partner in life, right? If it's not that's got to start with you. And then certainly you want to surround yourself with people that support your vision and your mission and your drive. But it's not their responsibility to cultivate it, right? Like, I think that you put yourself in positions with a choice few people that have your back and support you. But I also think that specifically in the workplace, that creates really unhealthy work relationships, because we look external for the boss to create an environment for us at work that's where we're fulfilled. I'm like, well, we have to know what that looks and feels like for us first. And like you said, if it's not the right culture, if it's not the right environment, that's fine. Don't stay in a shitty work environment. Absolutely. But I think we skip a few steps a lot of times, right? We exit a company before we've really understood and then we go try to find that somewhere else. Well, we don't know what that looks like for us, right? And so it's an inherently broken system. And people are always, look at most people, they're dissatisfied with their workplace. I work a lot with teams and leadership development, and how to build really productive teams. And I work with corporations all over the world, and it's something I care deeply about, but that has to start with the individual, right? Every company is not a crappy place to work. There are some that are not great, but there's also amazing companies. We just have to understand how we work in them, right? And how we show up and do good work. And it's something that I think is just massively important. And I think we might not give it, it's hard to do. And so I think it's something that we can find ourselves shying away from, because now more than ever, again, it's easier to get externally validated, right? To just say, oh, let me go find somebody who's saying what I am thinking, and I'll get them to agree with me, right? It's a talking head on Instagram, and we get a little burst of dopamine, and we feel good about ourselves, and we go back to whatever we were doing. I think to that end, I'd love this. We're kind of, it's got me thinking about people that are stuck, right? And there's a lot of people specifically or particularly in work environments that feel stuck, right? I can't change jobs, or I'm not happy at my job, or I want to start this company, or I want to go here, right? Like, there's lots of ways that can play out. And I think there's a lot of people in that space. So I'd love to hear, kind of in our closing time together, what's your advice, or what advice would you give someone who is in that place? If they're feeling stuck, if they're feeling dissatisfied, if they're not feeling motivated, if they're, a lot of the things that we've talked about in our conversation together, what's your advice to those individuals if they're feeling stuck?
Okay. I'm usually pretty rough with, that type of individuals, because I think they are their own victims, and they don't want to see it. And again, they just handed the power to other people to make them stuck. And again, like, I'm not saying, there are few cases where definitely the place, maybe the management changed, just the whole thing changed, and it's just not the right environment, and she'll leave. But 9 out of 10 times, I think people just gave up on trying, or certain situations at work got so bad that it's not worth fixing. And they accept all that sort of shitty situation, and they feel stuck. They are in a victim mentality, right? And then at that point, they feel like, actually, they feel subconsciously, they feel good feeling shit, if that makes sense. And my job is to make them see what else is possible in that shitty situation, if anything. And oftentimes, when I ask them, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And this, what about that? What about that? And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, why? Well, because, I don't feel comfortable. Well, do you think if you go somewhere else, like, they always think that the grass is always greener if they join another company that in some magical way, things are gonna just reset, and the boss is going to be coming around them and just tapping them on the shoulder. The pay is gonna be double. The promotion is just gonna. So, like, before you quit, like, I think anything, or you feel stuck, like, push yourself. Like, I know it's hard, but thinking outside of the box is like, it's the same with relationships. Maybe you're in a relationship that just feels stuck, stagnant, nothing, it's not exciting anymore. But then it's your job to make it exciting again. Maybe, like, we don't go out for dinner anymore, right? I mean, we just stay at home. Well, it's just your job to make it work. Whether you cook at home or you eat in the garden or with the neighbors or with your parents, this counts. But people just give up, in my opinion, too quickly. And I'm sorry, but they get very lazy with being creative about changing their own reality. And when they are able to see that there is still untapped sort of potential and opportunities that could explore before fully giving up or being really stuck, then their mindset kind of shifts. Like, well, I haven't really tried that. Okay, let me try that. And then I'm like, okay, try that and prove me wrong. If this and this and this and this doesn't work, then you're stuck. And then we move on. But they kind of, I feel like, they just accepted that fact that they kind of in the mud, if that makes sense, and they just keep kind of moving, and they just go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it gets harder and harder to make a move. What's your take on that?
I agree. Yeah, I think there's, and it's yeah. I mean, it ties into a lot of the things that we've talked about. Some of it is like the decision. Inability to make a decision, or this, maybe it's not an inability, but just an unwillingness to make a decision, and that creates comfort, right? And so we build. I think a lot of it is based around comfort, right? It is easier to be unhappy than it is to take action, oftentimes, and people are okay with that, right? And I agree with you. If you're truly fine, that's fine. But most people aren't, right? You're unhappy in your work, your relationship, you're unhappy with your health, you're unhappy. But until the pain of that friction overrides the pain of taking action, nothing's going to happen. And so I think, again, the best thing that we can do is to try to fast track that, right? How do we get to a place where you're ready to take action more quickly versus sitting in ambiguity and unhappiness for longer than you need to. And I think it's our responsibility. We have to do everything we can within our power first before we look externally and ask someone else to show up. Right. And so that is a responsibility that we have, and wherever you're at in life, or whatever kind of segment of our lives we're talking about, is I think you have to do you first, right? You have to take action. You have to be responsible for the role that we play in that thing. And then, like you said, yeah, okay, if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're still stuck and you're still getting the same results, okay, then we can look externally, and then it's time for a change, or we can explore other options. But there's lots of steps that we need to and can take first before we look elsewhere, before we look externally, or before we say that it's the job's fault, or it's I can't make it to the gym, or I can't make it to the right. Like and like you said, I tend to be harsh and pretty direct in this way too. Is I'm like, those are just lies that we've created, or a narrative we created to maintain comfort, right? Mm-hmm. Because it is easier to be unhappy than it is to go work out. Right. And or to start the business, or to go do the thing. So we sit in that because that's an easier pill for us to swallow than the pain of, taking action, or the effort required to take action in a different direction. And my real driving force for feeling that way is that I genuinely want people to reach their full potential. Right. My problem with that is, then you're sitting in that place, you're falling short of what you're capable of, right? And it's just a function of mindset shift, or being accountable to yourself, and taking action, and then recognizing what's really possible on the other side of that, right? Like, you don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be unfit. You don't have to not have a successful business. You don't, all these things that we feel like are not obtainable, often it's just a function of taking action and being accountable to ourselves first. So yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But yeah, what any closing thoughts or advice for folks listening? You've provided amazing wisdom thus far, but yeah, any closing guidance for those listening?
No, I think, look, I think, when I think about sports and then applying that to the, rest of the areas in our life, despite whatever's a career, business, relationship, like, I know it's as small as it is, like, first we need to see what we can change, what's within our control, and leave the rest of the world outside of it, whether they're partners, parents, business owners, customers. It's like, what can you do? Because this is what you can control. But we focus too much on the outside. So I think, like, really being in tune with ourselves and keeping ourselves sort of motivated and accountable, I think, are the most important and the hardest things to do. And as an athlete, it's like, pain is always going to be there. It's never going to be comfortable, because this is how you grow. And you just have to do work when no one is watching, because the performance, when, there are trophies, awards, it just happens very rarely. Because when you think about an athlete, maybe whoever even wins, like, I don't know, Tour de France, or, even, I don't know, any sort of championships, it's just such a small window in time when they actually perform, compared to countless hours of practice. So I think if you think the life is always just this, the sunshine and rainbows, like, it's just not that. Like, we need to learn how to enjoy the challenges. They are fun. If you take them away, we would never be happy. So it's almost like, bring me more challenge, the fun challenge. And I think as we grow, we just elevate our challenges to be just more complex and more rewarding to solve. But yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's great. Great sentiment to end on, and it ties us back kind of full circle. Is that, the opportunity is on the other side of friction, and I think setting ourselves up to recognize that the comfort is not the end goal, I think, is going to serve us all much better. So, well, thanks so much for your time. This is incredible. I appreciate your insight and your expertise, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Taylor.